morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name's Dionne Broughton. I'm the Sector Manager for Health and Social Care. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. Okay, so just really to go through the purpose of today's session, and it's really a first look at the draft structures of the new RQF diplomas. And I do emphasise the word draft because since submitting these draft structures a few days ago, we have made another amendment to the Level 2 Diploma in Care around the optional units. So we'll look at the structures, and you'll have an opportunity to view them and see how they fit in with the new apprenticeship standards. First thing I wanted to do is just re-emphasise the SACE framework is closing. And the current health and social care qualifications will all expire on the 29th of December, ready for the new launch of the RQF qualifications on the 1st of January. The one thing that I did want to emphasise is the Level 5 Diploma in Leadership and Management, in Leadership, Health and Social Care. The pathways will only expire in that qualification. The two remaining childcare pathways will remain open, so therefore the qualification will remain open because that qualification is being used in the Children, Young People and Families Trailblazer. So what you will find, the queue numbers of the pathways for the adults management, the adults residential and the adults advanced practice, those pathways will all close, but the qualification itself will remain open for use within another Trailblazer standard. So I'm sure you're all totally aware of the SACE framework closure, etc., etc. And again, all the qualifications will expire on the 29th of December. Okay, so the first qualification that we'll be launching to sit alongside the adult care worker apprenticeship standard will be the new Level 2 Diploma in Care, in brackets England, also in brackets this will be an RQF qualification. Very similar to what you're used to delivering at Level 2. It's got 46 credits and it's got 460 hours total qualification time. Okay, so there is a rule of combination within this qualification. And what we've done, there are no pathways, but what we've done is broken down the qualification for the optional units into knowledge units and competence units. Now, the decision we have made is that the new specification will only contain the mandatory units. All the optional units will be saved as PDF documents and they will be available on the website for you to download as appropriate per learner. We made this decision because I don't know about you, when I was delivering in centres, it used to drive me mad that I used to have to probably print off the whole of the spec and throw away quite a lot of the paper because I didn't need those units, or it was time consuming to sit and just print off the actual units that you needed. So we hope that's going to make life a little bit easier for people. So the specification will be a smaller specification, just housing knowledge, just housing the mandatory units only. All optional will be elsewhere on the website. Okay, and this qualification has 9 mandatory units and it's in line with the adult care worker standard. So when you see the titles of the mandatory units, they actually relate to the titles within the apprenticeship standard for the adult care worker. And as I said, there's no pathways. Learners choose the appropriate optional units that they wish to take. Now, one thing that I really want to stress is, and I'm sure you are all aware of this, that the driver for the apprenticeship is the standard, not the qualification. The qualification piggybacks. A lot of new apprenticeship standards do not have qualifications, so delivery is all around the standard. So again, moving forward, delivery is all around the standard. The qualification piggybacks that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is to bring up the draft structure for the Level 2, and just to give you a few moments just to have a look. Okay, so I hope that's just given you enough time just to have a look through and just see the structure and how it's looking and the optional units that we've put in there. So the optional units are in requirement to the RQF spec that we were provided by Skills for Care. Um, so we've had a really good look at the optional units, and I'm sure you all know that the level 2, particularly level 2 diploma, had a huge amount of optional units. So part of the process that we've been through is to completely look at every optional unit and how many times we certificated on that unit. And there were quite a few units in there that had no registrations or very little registrations over the last few years since the QCF diploma became live. So we've removed those and the optional units that we have put in are in line with the compliance from Skills for Care. Okay, so if we can go back to the slides, please. Okay, so that's a quick look at the level 2, and if you want to have a look at the mandatory content in much more depth, if you went onto the Skills for Care website, you will have access to the exact same document that we have to enable us to create the new qualifications. So on the Skills for Care website, if you the tabs across the top, if you clicked on the Learning and Development tab, if you then clicked into the Apprenticeship tab, and then onto the Qualifications tab, and then onto the Approved Qualifications tab, all of the new RQF specifications that we're working to are there. So you could have a look at that, which would help you understand the mandatory content a little bit more. We are hoping to have our draft specifications available in November. But if you are desperate for a heads up of the content of the mandatory, then do look at the RQF spec on the Skills Care website, because that is what we are actually working to develop if you want to start getting ahead of the game. Okay, so the next qualification to launch, which will replace the level 3 diploma, is the level 3 diploma in adult care. Again, England specific only. Very similar to what you're already delivering with 580 total qualification times. There is a rule of combination in there for the credits. And again, as I've said for the level 2, the specification will only contain all the mandatory units. All the optionals will be PDF, and you will have access to those next to the specification on the website. Okay, again, this qualification has 9 mandatory units, all in line with the Lead Adult Care Worker standard. So again, you will see those the unit headings are in line with the Lead Adult Care Worker standard. Again, we've got no pathways as before. We've just got the mandatory units and the optional units. Again, as I've just said for the level 2, the driver is the standard, not the qualification. And again, if you want to look at the mandatory content, today, tomorrow, before our draft spec comes out, you will find that RQF spec on the Skills Care website. Today, tomorrow, before our draft spec comes out, you will find that RQF spec on the Skills Care website. So what I'm going to do is bring up the level 3 structure for you to have a look at, exactly the same as before, where we've with the optional units, where we've made amendments, you will see the X's, but where the unit title is the same, we've not made any changes from the existing level 3. You will see the mandatory the units recognizer letter there. So I'll just give you just a couple of minutes just to have a quick look at that. Okay, so hopefully that's just given you a little time just to have a look at that, where you see we've added, on the last page, you can see that we've added some new units into the qualification, particularly around team leading and some management of learning and development. So we've added those units in line with the RQF spec, which weren't there before, and obviously blood samples, specimens. Okay, so the next qualification is the level 4 diploma in adult care, again, England specific, and again, very similar to what is already being delivered with a 700 hours total qualification time. Now, I know not a lot of people are delivering the level 4 diploma in adult care currently because it doesn't sit inside an apprenticeship framework, so therefore there was no funding attached. So for a lot of you, this is probably going to be a new qualification that you will be delivering under an apprenticeship framework. And again, same as I'm going to say all the time, this it's the standard for the leader in adult care. It's the standard that you'll be delivering. This qualification piggybacks on the back of that. So for the level 4 diploma, we have 11 mandatory units. So the existing level 4 diploma is not really that old. It was only launched 2 years ago. So what we've done in line with the RQF spec provided to us by Skills for Care, we've had a good look at that against the apprenticeship requirements to make sure that we've got all of the right mandatory content in there. Again, we've used a lot of the existing units that were already in the level 4. We've made some, the standards verifiers and the writers have reviewed all of the units to make sure they are fit for purpose. So again, there's been some changes, and any slight change made to a unit means that a new unit and reference number is required. We've used a lot of the existing optional units that were already in there. And we've put in quite a few new optional units into this qualification to ensure that there is a breadth of learning opportunity for the learners at level 4. As the level 4 will now sit under the apprenticeship framework, I guess this means it will now attract funding, unlike before. I think that's why the take up on the level 4 has been so low, because it was never put in a framework, so it never attracted funding. The only funding it attracted was the loans funding. So certainly a lot of the registrations that have been made have probably been employers paying for that delivery themselves, or learners may have taken out loans. But yes, it will now receive full funding under the apprenticeship frameworks. Now, as of yet, the level 4 and 5, I'm sure you're all aware, the levels 4 and 5 are not approved for delivery because the assessment plan has not been has not been approved by the DfE. The Trailblazer Group are working really hard to make sure that that is done and make sure that there is the provision that will be live for delivery in January. So because it's not live, we don't know what funding band it sits in yet. But what I do know is that the levels 4 and 5 will not sit in the same funding bands as the level 2 and 3. So again, I'm just going to bring up the draft structure for you to have a look at. I'll just give you a few minutes to have a look. Okay, so the level 5 diploma in leadership and management for adult care, again, England specific, credits, credits that need to be achieved at level 5 or above is 79, because obviously this is a much higher qualification. Now, we are further advanced with this development because we started this first last year. So this is actually ready to submit to Ofqual for the qualification number. We have a full specification for this. So we're hoping that we can share this on the website within the next few weeks. You would be able to have a look at that. And again, this relates to the leader in adult care. And again, we've got 11 mandatory units to support the advanced practitioner, standards. There are no pathways as before, but we have optional units to choose from. And I think, apologies, I think I've put there 11 optional units, but I think there's actually 18. And again, we should be able to launch this really soon, so you should be able to have much more visibility of this in the next few weeks. But I'll just show you the draft structure for you to just have a quick look at, but hopefully you will be able to get the full spec anyway. Okay, so just one other thing to draw to your attention about the assessment principles. So we always include the assessment principles in the specification, and we always include an annex at the back of the specification to the principles. So just one slight change here, that the level 2 diploma in care, there is a joint assessment principles, so skills for care and skills for health assessment principles, which is a new document for October 2017 version 1. So in the level 2, you will need to follow the joint assessment principles, but that's not applicable to the levels 3, 4, and 5. So for the levels 3, 4, and 5, it's the skills for care and development assessment principles that you already follow. So it's only just a change to that in the level 2 that you need to be aware of, but that will be included in the specification for you to see. So we're hoping to have the draft pre-publication spec for the mandatory units available in November. And as soon as we have those, I'm setting up the web pages. What I will do, I will make sure all of the account managers are aware of this, and they will send you all the links to where everything will be housed. What I'm also doing is working with the assessment team to make sure that you will all receive auto approval. So if you have no sanctions in place and you are currently making registrations to the existing diplomas, you will get auto approval and you will get a notification through when you have received auto approval. Now, regarding direct claim status, the senior standards verifier, Jane Metcalf, has made the decision that for all of the new suite, direct claim status will not be applied because there are some certain changes and it's checking it against the apprenticeship standards. So you will, when you're making your first certification requirements, be aware that you will require a standards verifier visit. One visit just to sign off that everything is okay with the new qualifications. So please be aware of that. Auto approval applies, but direct claim status doesn't apply. Any other questions, any observations, anything that you feel we may have missed within those specifications? We're grateful for all of your comments to make sure that we get the qualification to be the best it can for you to deliver. Got the most support you can to deliver the new qualifications, and that is time consuming, and hopefully we will be through that process quite soon.